Hello, I am Dr. Chandrashekhar, founder, coach, and someone deeply curious about what truly lasts. I want to explore the stories behind real impact and to help you uncover what it truly takes to build a meaningful legacy. Together, we'll sit down with visionaries, educators, and change makers, people who have walked the path and shaped lives, not just businesses. Welcome to the Legacy Blueprint. Hello and welcome to this another episode of the Legacy Blueprint with me, CSK. At the Legacy Blueprint, we just don't talk about success, we talk about significance. And to do just that, we have a guest all the way from Gurugram, New Delhi. And here today in our studio, we will discover a lot of things which are pertinent and relevant to you and me. What are we talking about? As we know that legacies are all about what we do with what we have and how we can make it meaningful for ourselves and the people around us. So goes the tagline of this podcast: grow people, build businesses, leave a mark. So without much delay, let me jump straight into welcoming our guest on today's podcast, Mr. Gaurava Yadav, the founder and moderator of Indian Principles Network, a friend, a philosopher, and more importantly, somebody who I often use as my sounding board. Because every time I meet him, we end up exchanging a lot of ideas. Some we bring it to reality, some we reflect upon our own journeys, and some today we are going to discover jointly with all of you. So Gaurava, thank you once again for joining me on this Legacy Blueprint podcast.
Thank you, CSK. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be with you and looking forward to our conversation.
Thank you. So just a couple of lines about Gaurava. He's the founder, moderator of the Indian Principles Network. He's also one person who believes in the power of community building. We will discover that as we go forward. And one of the foremost pioneers who looks at India in the whole gamut of the play of education and how we should take those decisive steps to be at the forefront of the AI revolution as far as education is concerned. And I'm going to explore that as well with him. So whether it is IPN or IPN Academy or the Mission AI Million, that is Mission AIM, or the Asian Education Coalition or AEC, we will be talking all about that, but of course not before allowing him to tell a little bit about himself, his journey, because I know that you started as a telecom guy and then you moved very quickly towards this sector called education and nation building. So Gaurava, why don't you take us all through your journey?
Yeah, so firstly, I think I should compliment you for even thinking of this. And we were discussing before coming to the podcast that what is the entire purpose or the objective behind this series of podcasts which you are doing with multiple guests of yours. And I think I should, as I said, I will compliment you for the very fact that you could think of something which is not just today holds its relevancy, but in the times ahead will be of great relevance for all the viewers, young of different age brackets, especially for young ones, as you were sharing with you. So, as you know, I mean, I was raised in a small town. My upbringing was as a typical any household in India with a middle class value system, and I did my 12th in a place called Jhansi in Uttar Pradesh, and straight from there I went on to my further studies for that matter. But important for our conversation is that whenever you start your journey, either professional or something which you want to do for your own self, you are always caught up in certain thought process that how you would want to build or how you want to shape up your life, and the sooner you have a hang of it, it is better for you as a professional. And I would not say that it came to me very early, but I definitely would say that I was very, very clear about few fundamentals on which I wanted to build my professional career, which I see that when I work with a lot of young ones today is something which I really want to pass on to them whenever I get that time. I always say this, that we are now old enough, or we have spent enough time now building it the hard way, so that we can be of relevance to these young ones. So I after completing my graduation or in my post-graduation, I was working in Delhi for good 5 odd years, and there I built my telecom sort of a career, but predominantly within the telecom domain. I was actually a communication professional all throughout, and as luck would have it, it's about being at the right place at the right time. Many times you find yourself in such situations, and I was lucky. I had a very fantastic, if I would say, a mentor, my senior, who really mentored me very well. He was kind enough, and I always owe a lot of my success to him. And I wish for everyone that you get such mentors in your life who really, without any conditions, support you out. They nurture you, and they are like your sounding board, which is an imperative in life whenever you are young or when you are starting out. So for me, that entire journey, or that entire, I would say, phase of learning was phenomenal, and I owe all of it to that phase of 4 to 5 years in my life, which was in a small company in New Delhi, in the telecom domain. And I always say this, that whenever we are building our career or whenever you are starting out, you should start with young teams, or teams which are really shaping up the narrative, and where you are in the mix of things, for that matter. I got lucky, not that I planned it for it, but I would say that whenever I pass on this, I say this to the young graduates, postgraduates, that who are really chasing from the very beginning either a very high package or very high organization. I think it's time they reflect on, work with smaller setups, work with young entrepreneurs, because there the learning you have is phenomenal, for that matter. And again, I was sharing this with somebody yesterday when we were having this very candid conversation, and it was a moment for me as well to reflect. Sometimes you don't give it a thought, but I realized that I had never planned to be an entrepreneur, never, ever in my wildest dream. It just so happened to me that in 2012, the project which we have done for this corporate, which is about community development. So I built India's largest community of technology leaders as well, back in 2007, which interestingly got an international award in Singapore in 2012. And that to me was a breakthrough period for me as a professional. And that is a time when I got this opportunity to work with my seniors. They had this offer for me, which is about, can we start something together, building communities at a larger scale. Back in 2012, this was very, very sort of a naive idea, or I would say very young. And when we started out, we were doing something phenomenally unique, and we were relevant to it. But as, say, you don't always plan for things which are unexpected, it so happened that the venture which we started couldn't really go the distance. And then what we decided was that I had already taken a plunge. And then I really started my own venture, which, just for the benefit of your viewers, was into quizzing for school students, actually. I was a national level quizzer. I still do a lot of quizzing, because that's my first love. And a lot of things happen not by design, but as you go along the journey of being an entrepreneur, you start building few things which come to you through the experience you gain in that journey. We will take that up as we go along, but I hope this gives a little context to your viewers, that how has been my journey, and in subsequent question, I will possibly take some time to dwell upon them as well.
Absolutely. I mean, we will talk about it. In fact, my question still remains about the reason or the purpose for which you started looking at the Principles Network as a community, and why did you get into that? But before that, a couple of things very interesting from your introduction and your journey is a small town boy creating off with a lot of dreams and venturing out to the national's capital and working in that environment. But you also harped upon an interesting conversation called mentoring. You know, the kind of exposure you got from whoever the gentleman was, and how he gave you unconditional exposure or support or whatever. So maybe a couple of things you may give it to us, because the kind of viewers who join us on this podcast are those professionals or individuals who are looking at creating a meaningful body of work for themselves and for the community and society. But there are a lot of questions, there are a lot of these self-doubts. But what do you think like coming from a small town, you yourself will have or would have had your own share of questions. So how did that shape up for you? And as you sit here today and where you are in this position, what is that one or two pieces which you would like to share with them?
No, I think a fundamental, a brilliant sort of a question, why I'll tell you, because this has a very important relevance in today's times, which is specifically, we shy away from respecting people who we learn from somehow. And when I say maybe respect is an extreme word, I will tone it down. I'll say people do not really give enough due to people who we learn from. And I think that's where the entire role of having a great mentor or having a relationship with a mentor or a mentee is a very imperative one for everybody, if I may say. If you want to learn, remember, certain things in life can only come through time, which is experience. And I'm sure when somebody is senior to you who has put in the hard yards or they have really experienced the life, and learning from their experience is, I think, is a very low denominator sort of a deal you can do with that person.
Absolutely.
The only thing in turn they ask from you is respect, what I have seen. So
or just acknowledgement, that you due respect or
absolutely.
acknowledgement.
I think that's the right word, that I think acknowledging that you learned from that particular person, he or she, is immaterial. But the fact remains, somehow I feel, maybe I'm in a different kind of universe right now, but I definitely feel that there is a little reverence which is missing. People shy away from going to the extent of saying that I learned from this particular gentleman or I really gained from his experience example. I think that is something which should be inculcated. So therefore, these stories should really go out. People should understand the importance of what is the role a mentor could play. As you pointed out, I would love to put that on record, that the gentleman's name, he's absolutely live and kicking, is Sujoy Mukherjee. He's my senior. He is again a professional, but I have learned everything, but I owe to my professional success to him. I always say this whenever I get that opportunity. So I hope people who are listening, especially the young ones, really go out and identify a mentor for themselves, right? It need not necessarily be in your close proximity. Today, the world we live in, that person can be anywhere in the world. He or she should inspire you, he should motivate you, and eventually, if I may say, in return, if we can give them acknowledgement and respect, I think that's what they are all looking for.
Absolutely, fantastic. And yes, we do acknowledge the role of people who shape our lives. Now, jumping to the next part, and I want you to kind of use this particular thing because an interesting conversation came up when you said the word relationships. Because today, as we build businesses or talk to people around, I personally feel, and correct me if I'm wrong, people are trying to tend towards transactional. The way you deal with people is more transactional as it should be relationship building. So I want you to connect these two things about IPN as a community, because community itself builds and thrives on relationship. But why did you choose to build IPN, and what is that role relationships play in IPN?
Again, you've seen me all along, if I may say, at least for good half a decade. You've been with us IPN. Now you're part of IPN family, in fact. So, in fact, the journey of putting IPN together is a second inning for me. My first inning, as I shared with you in the initial part, was building a community for the CIOs in India. And those were, for me, actually the building blocks of understanding the power of community. Taking it back, I was a young professional having no nuances of really learning what is community or etc. We really stumbled upon the very idea of that, how do we connect with people or who are prospective customers to are better. And answering your point was, which is that every brand, more or less, at least in our times, was getting into what I call a transactional exercise with a customer. And we were the possibly thought leaders in that domain, and we decided that we will go beyond that transaction. Even while they are our customers, we want to establish genuine, what we call relationship with them, which are professional relationships. And the foundation of these professional relationships are honesty, trust, under-promising, over-delivering. So we were very clear that when we create a professional relationship with anybody, for that matter, who we were coming across to, we will keep these pillars of our salient sort of a guidelines. And when we built that community, we had almost 1,600 CIOs on that particular platform at the time I led the platform basically. We realized that whenever we used to talk to those CIOs, the feedback we used to get was that I can trust the words which are coming from this platform. And any brand, big, small, or huge, in today's world or time when we started it, thrive on these principles. It's about the promise a brand makes, and is it delivering on that promise, or it is falling short on that promise which they have delivered. So when we had created that, and when I got the chance of working in this sector, while my journey began in 2013, I only started IPN, which is Indian Principles Network, in the year 2016.
Okay.
Because in 3 years, I was traveling across the north terrain of India because I'm based in the north. Predominantly, my work area was in the north. And I was meeting a lot of leaders. And what I was realizing was that I have been looked upon with a certain lens. And I wanted to change that lens which was looking at me. From the same lens, they were looking at other, what I call the vendor ecosystem.
Yeah.
And I never wanted to put myself in that same basket because I definitely knew that I had different thing to offer to them. And maybe this is my final thing which I have not shared with many people. I have always believed in this, that before we expect from any relationship as to what do I get out of that relationship, we have to reflect on what have we given to that relationship.
True.
And IPN has been based on this particular principle that when we started, and we are till date, which is almost a decade now, I have always asked this question, have I given any value add to the leader who has become the part of IPN family before asking him or her as to what I gain out of them? That's the motto, unsaid motto of IPN, but that's what I have lived day in, day out.
No, absolutely. I mean, fantastic. Just for us to even paraphrase the whole thing and sum it up. Personally, I have benefited tremendously from IPN. As an education leader myself, I came in touch with this network, and I think I'm one among the 30,000 odd people who have been touched by this platform. But what he mentioned is even more powerful than the platform itself, as to every time you keep asking this question, have we done enough? Have we given enough to that relationship? And I don't want to even sound very promoting of IPN here, but at the same time, I want to clear certain things to the benefit of the larger community. This is one such forum where every educator looks forward to be a part of the conversations, because I hardly come back from an IPN event, whether it is a dialogue or a summit or a conference or whatever maybe the terminology is used for that particular event, but I hardly return back without any good, valuable insights to implement in my workplace. So, Gaurava, that's amazing, and I keep saying this because the other thing which I also see is when you build a relationship, or when you look at building relationship, it's very common to kind of identify a canvas and then play to your strengths. But what I see in your way of approaching this is, every year, now that I have been associated with you and IPN for over 4 years now, every year you try to add those untapped territories of the country, the hinterland, into your mainstream. Like this year, you added Siliguri as one of the locations for taking IPN there. Is that a conscious design, or it happens by default for you? Because when you're building something, there are two ways to do it. One, you go with the flow, or two, you kind of manage the flow. So what has been your perspective about this?
Oh, happy you asked this because this tells or brings out the real story of what the way IPN is run, because I've never said this before and people will get to know from this podcast, is that firstly, IPN is a very bottom-up network. When I say bottom-up, I mean to say IPN from day one when I started, I wanted to bring the hinterland or the tier 2, tier 3 town or tier 4 towns of the country to the fore. There were enough network, and there are more networks in India who only cater to a certain segment of people, either the metros or the top elite schools of the country. And I was absolutely of the view that I don't want to go to that path. I would take the journey of IPN through the smaller towns. So therefore, when we had that as a statement to guide us, what we decided upon, which is every year when we sit in the beginning of the year, which is during the period of January, February, we decide upon to go to regions which we have not tapped so far. So that's a very conscious call And especially when we even put that mix together, now IPN is more or less, I would say, I can be a little pompous about it, that yes, we have a fairly decent reach in the country. We are more or less have leaders from across, say, 700 odd districts in India. We have leaders from almost 700 districts on our platform. So, but at the same time, India is a massive country. Our country is massive, and there's so much of work to be done already. So, I mean, at least for us, well, that's the way we see it. So, we every year when we sit down, we say we'll go to 5 new centers or say 10 new centers, and we create a mix of new centers and the previous one where we have not gone for say 2 year or 3 years, so that we have to make sure that we are relevant.
So you renew the
relationship there. So that's the way we structure it. And yes, it's always been a conscious call to work in those areas where people are untouched, or I would say the larger canvas of education has not reached. IPN is that platform. We want to work with those leaders as well.
No, it's interesting because if you look at it, so far we have covered some ground, and these things, what we have covered, harp upon a couple of talking points. One is you build relationships. 2, you build those relationships by being honest to the value system which you set for yourself. In this case, it was honesty, it was transparency or truth, and then it was about under-promising, over-delivering. So that's number 1. Number 2, by design, you have a kind of a clarity that, okay, I will go to untapped areas, I will also manage and balance the tapped areas and try to renew relationship. So what am I trying to tell you, so to paraphrase the entire thing so far in this conversation, is whatever may be the nature of work you set out to do, you need to be loyal to that particular purpose which you decide. And let me tell you this honestly, we all run organizations, we all run companies, or we all work in different organizations. Nobody can protect the purpose as well as you can do it. So leaving aside the big words like legacy, the first and the most important thing is identify the purpose for which you stand and protect it with all the might you have, because that's your job, that's your responsibility. Now, let's kind of widen the net a little bit. Yes, IPN, community building, value system, relationship. But you are in the bigger space, so to say, called education. And in our country, education is often abused than celebrated, because the common complaint we hear is it's not good enough or it's not doing enough. But pre-COVID or towards the latter half of the last decade and then early years of this decade, we see a lot of boom and lot of eyeballs rolling over the kind of valuations companies got, the edtech kind of I'll say the floods of the edtech gates opened and a lot of things happened. But somewhere I think the big giants who really were catching it up lost the plot. What do you think was the main reason why this happened? And is that the way to leave a legacy or build a business, or do you have any other things to add to that particular thing?
No, we did discuss this off the camera as well, but the fact remains, I think, Chandra, the larger point here is that we as a nation, we all know is a very young nation, and we are seeing this undercurrent that there's a tremendous startup ecosystem which is really getting shaped up in our country. If I may say, the word is shaped up, it is getting shaped. So now we have two worlds to compare. We have lived in an era where our forefathers gave us talks of building brands like Tatas or the Birlas and many others. So we come from, because I'm a 80 born, you are a 80 born, we come from a very interesting phase of life or a generation which has seen both these worlds. And when we have to create that fine balance, or if I may say a blueprint for the next phase of our country's growth, and I'm sure we all are talking about the Viksit Bharat, but the fact remains, every young one who is going to be or aspires to be an entrepreneur or want to be part of that journey of what we both represent, if I may say, they have to make that choice. The choice is, and invariably, this is what happens, you get inspired by people or you are surrounding yourself with the kind of noise or I would say conversations. And what we hear today, unfortunately, is the kind of matrix I personally have refrained myself from, and I personally would advocate that the young ones, any one of them for that matter, who are going to listen to this, they need to sit before they even start what they want to stand for. And when you have that clarity that this is my road ahead for that matter, I think a lot of the things become far more clearer rather than me getting caught up in the narrative which I am hearing in the ecosystem right now today.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, interesting point. First ask that question, what are you standing for, or what do you want to be standing for? And then look at the narrative in the vicinity with that lens. Because if you go to the whole epicenter and get carried away with the narrative which gets changed every now and then without you knowing what exactly you want to stand for or you want to do there, you are bound to get carried away with the flow.
Absolutely. You are driven by the forces which are surrounding you. Yes. On the contrary, it should be from within. What do you stand for? When you have that clarity, then there will be a lot of tsunamis which will come. There are cyclones will come around you. But then you have the wherewithal to withstand those tsunamis which are surrounding you.
Fantastic point, yes.
So I think that is where I can only talk for myself. I was very, very clear, and I think I have only got clearer in my thought process that what do I want to stand for? Yes, monetarily we have to be evaluated, but that should not be the starting yardstick of any young one or any entrepreneur-led startup in our country. The matrices should be changed. And I believe your podcast will become that sort of a spark that we will make this conversation a mainstream conversation, that when people who are investing in these young leaders, the matrix of evaluation should be the purpose, the value system of that entrepreneur, not that how much of creative Excel sheets or money he can project to you. That should not be the criteria, because you and I agree to one point very, very specifically, that to build anything substantial, you need a minimum 1 decade of hard work.
Absolutely.
Nothing meaningful can be built. It can be, again, we will use that word transaction. You can be very successful in a transaction. But if you look the long haul of that, I don't think so. People would like to invest in such a venture, which is only a transaction. People would love to be remembered for a legacy, or I would say the work they have done, which is remembered and has impacted more people than one. So that's, I think, the matrices needs to be really reshuffled. And for that, it will take a town to do it. We are possibly only talking about it. And we are only talking about it because you have lived it. So I think more people should talk about it. This should become a more conversation which should be more inclusive as a conversation, because for a young one, Chandra, it's a difficult task to take that path, because he or she is any which way swayed by the narrative or the social noise which they hear, which is showing only the glamorous part of those things. On the contrary, life of an entrepreneur is very unglamorous. And I want, through this podcast, people should understand the unglamorous part of it and the reality of it.
Yes. No, absolutely. I mean, this is brilliant, because yes, we empathize with all of us and all of you who want to make it big, who want to achieve success, and so to say, be financially, economically very, very productive and successful. But at the same time, you also have to carry the weight upon your own shoulders of living that particular moment and trying to navigate the currents which you encounter as you keep going towards your goal. But having said that, what is coming out very strongly here is nothing worthwhile gets built if you don't give yourself at least a decade.
Absolutely.
1 decade of good, meaningful, productive work. That's one of the important things which has come out. The second thing, which I would like to explore a little more deeper, is you may set across or set out to make a small difference, but in that process of being loyal and consistent to make a difference to that particular thing, you will start shifting the needle in the larger ecosystem. So let me give you an example. So for example, when actually Tatas came into India and they said that, okay, we are trying to bring in industrialization, we are trying to bring in development, they did not make big inroads to the infrastructure or the information technology or whatever. They started with as basic as production of steel, right? And then one thing led to another, one thing led to another, hospitality, or today you name it, they are into everything, because the vision and the purpose was very clear that we want to see or build nation, build our country, build India. That's the thing. So similarly, microsize the whole conversation to yourself as an individual, as a human. I want to change the whole world, no doubt about it. And there are two ways to do it. One, put a little bit of myself in everything, or go back to what Mahatma Gandhi said. He said, be the change you want to see around you, and then try to do one thing which you are very good at, which you know you are confident at, and then start doing it. And that becomes your legacy. That becomes the talking point. He said, when he went to people, when he traveled the northern country in that 2013 to 2016, the lens with which people saw him was something which he did not agree. And that's why he took it upon himself to change it. That is you living your purpose and making conscious effort to move the needle to your direction. Now, I come back to you and I want to speak specifically about how you are now expanding. Okay, you have a design that you want to tap the hinterland, you want to balance the cities, but you're not just doing only that, because IPN I think is in its 10th year if I'm not wrong. So you have given yourself that decade and you have seen some success and you have come a distance in this one decade. What next? What is in store for IPN? And as you grow and expand, I know that you have the Asia as a subcontinent you're looking at. How can you do it? And you personally are investing a lot of your time and effort and energy in understanding how things are changing in this landscape. Because I see you every quarter attending one or the other events, whether it is in Paris or whether it is in Singapore or in Middle East or wherever. And every time I ask you, you say that I'm learning, I'm exploring, I'm looking at it. So is there something which you are working on? What is next for the next decade of IPN?
Absolutely. In fact, I kept on sharing every bit of that progress, but just for the benefit of all, we had very specifically looked upon, at least from the past one decade, since the COVID phase, IPN really has evolved into something which I also initially never thought that we can do that. But when we started now identifying certain areas where we believe that we will add the greatest value to our countries and this region's ecosystem. And as we will going to discuss, but the fact remains that one of the areas of real substantive work in India, at least in India, in our country, is how do we sort of train our teachers or our ecosystem of education for the next sort of a 1 or 2 decade. Because honestly, while we know about the AI and everything else surrounding it, we also know that the entire school ecosystem across the world is transitioning into the next phase.
Yeah.
And whatever I have gathered from the little travels I have done for myself, and because I firmly believe before you make any kind of preaching statement, you should have a little homework done, or you should really do that journey yourself, because then you are in a position to really talk about it well.
Absolutely.
It's again our way of doing it. It's about before you talk, do the walk and understand it. So as far as IPN next phase goes, which is exactly a decade from now, we're going to actually complete our first decade on this coming March. So 2016 is when we started on the 10th of March, and 2026 is when we complete our 1 decade. So yes, whatever we have done is behind us now. That's a great experience, or the great launchpad the way we see it. And now the next 1 decade, what we are planning for is based upon only specific pillars. And those couple of pillars are, one is that we want to empower educators from India and Indian subcontinent, in fact, where we have expanded now to Nepal, Bhutan, and other geographies of Asian region. Because I think that's a logical now next step for us. We have done substantive work in India, and that can be replicated across. Apart from educators, which is empowerment of them, I have firmly believed, and I believe this strongly, that the next wave of innovation will come from our young ones. You and I always say this, have lived our primes, right? Whatever we have gained, we will pass forward. But to me, the innovation, the enterprise will come from these young bloods, people in their early teens. and they need the right inspiration. They need right canvases to showcase their talent. So IPN in the next 1 decade has few plans which is going to work on these two very specific areas, which is we have taken a mental to train almost 1 million educators in the next 1 decade. That is one of our goals. The other one is that we are launching series of intellectual properties in the space of creating an innovation campus, or I would say innovation canvas for these young ones to explore and showcase their talent to the world. And you may never know, that's the way I put it, that's the way I'm seeing it, the next perplexity will come from India.
Absolutely.
That's what we are aiming for.
Absolutely. I mean, when I hear to you the plans, what you are sharing, I am reminded of that one thing where, when you set out to travel, especially imagine that you are setting out to travel with your family on a dark, rainy night. You may not see the destination at once, but your headlights will allow you to see the next 100 meters. And with that 100 meters, you make the safe transit, and then you see the next 100 meters. And every 100 meters add to the journey, and the whole enjoyment is the journey itself, because at the end of the day you will reach your destination, but you will remember the whole travel for the journey.
Absolutely.
So when you are building anything, in his case it is IPN, in your case it may be your own company or your own career or your own family, whatever it is, see the next 100 meters, but be genuine and involved in that 100-meter journey, because that's how you keep moving the needle forward, and also you keep building something worthwhile for people to look at you and meaningfully associate that with you. So that's the thing. Another important thing which I would like to harp upon or touch upon in this conversation is, you travel the world. You've been meeting a lot of educators, a lot of thought leaders, a lot of people who are moving far ahead when it comes to research, or when it comes to ideas, or when it comes to enterprises. AI is the buzzword of the industry and also the country today. What do you see the role of AI in the entire education sector? That's my question, part A. But more importantly, question part B is, where does India stand and what can India do to go forward? Because you said, and I quote, that the next perplexity may come from India, and our teens, our young generation may be the people who will be building it. So if that has to come true, India needs to do something, right? So in your own exploration, what do you think we should do?
Great question, purely because it's a flavor of the season, in fact, if you look at today. Answering the first part of your question, first of all, the best way of, in my own humble way of summing up what is happening in the world of AI is, honestly, it is going to take our imagination to the next level, and it will be in our lives, come what may, what we decide upon. We may refrain from it, we may not choose to be part of it, but it will be here to stay. And what all it will do, nobody can today pinpoint and tell you this, because it will have an over-passing sort of impact. So I think the mindset for anybody, no matter you are in the space of education or you are a general user, it should be about embracing AI with what it has to offer to you. What I'm witnessing over the travels I have made is that there are people who are leading this conversation. There are people who are cautiously optimistic about this conversation, and then there are people who will invariably become the laggards of this conversation. So in this segmentation, my only effort is that I don't want India or Indian educators to be on the third pedestal. Least they will be on the second, and at best what we aim is to be in the top.
Okay.
So the narrative, or I think AI is providing a great opportunity for India as a nation to rewrite our position in the world of school education in the world. That's a great sort of an opportunity AI is laying out. It's now up to us how we rewrite this. That's third part of the question. Second part is, as I mentioned, maybe I'm wrong, we have lived our prime. Today, when I have a conversation with the younger one, my daughters are young, they are 13 and 11, I find myself to be outdated. Their language, their grammar is different. Our language, our grammar was different. So the biggest acceptability as a father I do all the time is that I have to accept this. I have lived my prime. And I have to now pass this baton to my younger ones. And for me, because I have that tremendous opportunity, I call this that I have the beautiful opportunity of working with lakhs of educators and lakhs of students every year. So my responsibility becomes all the more, I would say, daunting for me. That if I don't do this, I will do a great disservice to whatever I have done in the first decade of my life. So I want to pass this baton to these young ones to be those innovators, be those enterprising individuals. And the least we can do together is that we have to pass on this to them so that they don't make those mistakes which possibly our generation did. Yeah. That's the only thing what we are focusing on, these two aspects right now.
No, absolutely, and our best wishes and my best wishes to you as you explore that particular canvas, because that's the need of the hour. And I completely understand that with AI, we have an amazing opportunity for, just look at it. Give yourself this particular thought that a school teacher in one of the rural districts of the country doesn't have to depend anymore on anybody to guide, to show them the way, because it's as simple as going on ChatGPT or Perplexity or Gemini and then putting your ideas. You may not even have to be perfect vocabulary wise, grammar wise. You just write what you want in your regional language and it is going to throw up 10, 100 or even 1,000 ideas as to how you can make your class interesting. Okay, out of that, you may pick 2 or 3 and try to do it. And that is the opening spot for children to start looking at, oh, wonderful, my teacher is able to do this. Can I push it further more? And there you are creating an entire new ecosystem of teaching, learning process.
Absolutely.
And this, in maybe 90s or 2000s, you had to depend for the board to give you a circular and the circular to be implemented. Before implementing, somebody has to interpret the circular and then tell, no, this is what the circular means. Now you don't have to do all that. You're fast forward. Like India, we keep saying you come from telecom. We are a generation who skipped the entire pagers as an instrument. We went from landline straight into mobile phones.
Absolutely.
Right? So similarly, AI is giving us that leapfrog movement where we can move from A point to point F without going to B, C, D and E. That's the whole beauty of AI. I look forward for that. Now, Gaurava, this is good stuff, but let's also talk the fun stuff, right? So I will not call it rapid fire because we will want to keep it a little more slow paced, but I want to ask you a few questions which are not AI, not IPN, not business, not legacy, but person, the Gaurava Yadav as a person. What do you love to do when you are free or when you have free time on your hands? What is that go-to thing which you indulge yourself in?
Couple of things. One is I love to spend time with my own self.
Okay. I think my own self.
Absolutely.
Okay.
I think we take this for granted. I have lived with myself for past 43 years, but I haven't appreciated myself enough. So I personally like my, what we call it in our terminology, the me time. I generally want to just introspect, sit with myself, just listen to a good song. That's my best time I spend whenever I get that time, which hardly gets. And I should put this as a second option, but my first option is to be with my daughters. I love being with them. They are my prized possession, if I may say. And whatever little time, I get very less time, but whenever I get my time, those are my two eyes, if I always call them, you are my two eyes, right? I can't love one and more than this one, but these are the two only things, indulgences, if I may say, I don't do anything else. I no longer play sports. I go for my walk. All those stuffs are secondary, but they are more of a rituals. But as you said, what do I love doing? These two things are.
So behind the man in the jacket, because I've always seen you either in a full jacket or a Nehru jacket or a Modi jacket, but behind those jackets is Gaurava Yadav, a pure soul and whole family man who believes and loves his me time.
I absolutely love that.
Right.
Yes.
So the second thing which I would like to ask, do you love to spend time in the forest or you're more of a beach and
I would any day go for a forest. I come from a background which is agricultural. My family forefathers used to do that.
So nature.
I love to be with the nature, and considering the way where I was raised is in the north, we don't get any beaches there, so we were not conditioned to be around beaches. but we were definitely conditioned to be in farms. So we have our own farmhouses, and we love to go there whenever we get the time.
Good. So what's the easiest or the best thing you would like to do? Netflix, OTTs, or a good book and a cup of coffee or chai?
Chai for me, definitely. Never been a coffee person. But yes, not really a Netflix, but definitely a good India match on cricket. That is my love.
So sports.
Absolutely. I have been always a sports person. Yes. Today, because my daughters play badminton, so I follow the badminton track of BWA World Tour throughout. So I'm watching right now the German Open, which is happening. I exactly know what is the score line and everything, because that's a quizzer in me. But yes, I love sports.
So Hyderabad is for
many reasons, badminton,
the badminton
absolutely.
capital.
I definitely know about that. Yes.
Good. And pre-COVID, post-COVID, how much of travel has reduced in your life, or travel is still the same because you love to connect with people at the grassroots levels? I've traveled with you to Gwalior, to the Scindia school. So I like to understand from you that do you prefer a online conversation or offline is still your go-to thing? What is that you prefer?
Travel actually post-COVID for me, because IPN really expanded. Pre-COVID we were predominantly a very north-central sort of a network. IPN took a really massive shape in the southern part as well. So definitely travel has increased, there is no two ways about it. But if you ask me my preference, I prefer doing a Zoom call from my room or from my corner in my home than any day. I'm not really a very, very physical or one-on-one person. I generally feel if the message is conveyed well, and if it is done through a convenient fashion, which I think Zoom is far more convenient, I think that's the medium I usually prefer.
Good. So 2 last questions. One, for the audience. Now that you spent so much time and you've established the mind space with all of them, what is that 1 or 2 things which you would like to leave behind for them to harp upon, which they can do it from their point of view? That's my first question. Second question is, what does Gaurava Yadav want to be remembered for?
Heavy questions. So first question, first reply, I think you said it in your statement that when you are building something, you should have a 100 meter and then a further look at it, 100 after the next 100. I think when you are building something substantial, understand and have this clarity. You can't build this on day one. And I'll give you an example. When we set out, we had to decide upon, are we running a sprint or are we in for a marathon? So usually, whenever you're trying to run a sprint, you have initially a lot of enthusiasm and a lot of energy, but you fizzle out after that 100 meter. And that's what the current model of our work people, what I see, they are all into that sprint mode. But when you are building a startup, please understand this, you are running a marathon, a long marathon. So when you have that clarity in the very beginning, you will invariably find yourself in a very right space. Next is, I think I have, and I've always lived this for that matter, is be honest to yourself. Again, sometimes we are too caught up with that we want to be honest to others. I think that's, for me at least, it has never worked. The day I have felt the most comfortable one is that when I have lived it with complete honesty to the values I have set out for myself. Which is that if it is not good for my own self, how it can be good for the other person? So I put that yardstick in terms of my work when I put myself in that shoe, and then I would like to see that person in that similar fashion, or the treatment I want to give that to that person. That if I would have been in their place, how would have been my response? So what I've realized is that it had kept me in good stead. That the kind of yardstick I put for my own self, when I put it in front of the other person, or I see it for myself, I find that I give them enough space to make some errors also, because everybody is a human being at the end of the day. We make those errors, human errors. But the moment person starts making those errors repeatedly, then we call it's their behavior. And then we become cautious.
Yeah.
And then we try to take a back seat. Lastly is that I think, it comes to me very naturally, is that try to have an attitude toward knowing or discovering the unknown, which you possibly feel after a certain age that I don't want to learn any further. And I have realized that there is so much to do, even whatever you have done so far in life. So one of the punchline, in fact, we were thinking of for our own journey of our quizzing program. And we had to come to something very, very small and something which I was always grappling with, and I never arrived at it. And just let me tell you, it's taken us almost a decade to come at that. And last, I think 15 days ago, I was just questioning my own self, what does this entire quizzing program quest do to the young ones?
Young ones, okay.
And only 3 words were required, and it really was a Eureka moment. It said, discovering the unknown is the journey which every one of us have to undertake.
Absolutely. I mean, well said, yeah.
So it's an unknown, but if you're not ready for that unknown, you somehow get a little left behind, which at least I can't afford to, because I'm in a very dynamic space of work. And we always find ourselves that whenever we have kept that to ourselves, we are always 6 to 12 months ahead of what we want to do. So that's my, maybe a little longish one, but I feel these are things which have kept me in good stead, and anyone who can gain out of it, I will be more than happy.
Absolutely. I mean, that 3 words are really powerful, discovering the unknown. And I think for the times to come and the tales to be told, I'm sure people will remember Mr. Gaurava Yadav, the founder and moderator of Indian Principles Network, and many other things which he's doing along with side, as the person who constantly discovered the unknown.
Absolutely.
So thank you very much, Gaurava. Thanks for
Pleasure.
joining us and taking the time to be here. I'm sure all of us enjoyed this conversation this morning. And before I conclude, I will leave you guys with a couple of things. Number one, first of all, yes, from the bottom of our hearts, thank you for joining and patronizing the Legacy Blueprint podcast. Without you, we are nothing. Without your constant help and support and viewership, we will not grow. And on that note, I will request each one of you to share some feedback, because as they say, feedback is the breakfast for champions. So if we get your feedback, we can kind of do the course correction and bring in the right type of people, because this podcast journey is not for today or tomorrow, it's for the times to come, and it is for the generations to come. So your feedback is going a long way in building that edifice of knowledge center for people to come back and look at it and start building legacies for themselves. That's number one. And number two, something a little giveaway as I go is, I'm sure all of you have your Netflix subscriptions. There is this movie of Dhanush called Idli Kadai. I've not completed it. I just started watching it last evening, but a phenomenal movie. I think I still have an hour and a half to go, but whatever I've seen so far for 40-50 minutes is phenomenal, from the single point of contact of the dilemma which each one of us go as to, should we chase money, name and fame, or should we be really happy by doing what our heart wants us to do. In his case, it is going back to his father's idli shop and maintaining the continuity or legacy of his own idli shop in a small village, which I think many of us don't even know exists in India. But the fact is, that's the constant battle we all go through, and that movie has brought it on the big screen. So I personally feel that it's a great way to reflect on our own life. So if you have time, if that genre interests you, please spend a couple of hours watching it, and I think it will not waste your time, and you will get your time's worth when you do that. With that, we come to the end of one another episode of the Legacy Blueprint. Thank you, each one of you, for joining us. Thanks, Gaurava, for joining. And I'll be back soon with the next episode, and looking forward for you guys on the other side. Thank you.